Today we're digging into a pretty radical idea from Denis Farhaj. He suggests that the real roots of conflict, they aren't in our disagreements, but in the way we actually think. It's this wild theory connecting our mental habits to real-world violence. So let's get into it. I mean, really think about that for a second. What if the risk of violence isn't just about what we argue over, but it's about how our brains are, or maybe aren't, wired to handle those disagreements? This is the big question at the heart of Farhaj's theory, and honestly, it's a total game changer. Okay, so how exactly does Farhaj make this leap from our thoughts to actual conflict? Well, he says it all boils down to what he calls our cognitive toolkit, the mental models we use to make sense of everything. And when that toolkit is missing a couple of crucial instruments, things can get really messy really fast. So here's the bottom line, the core thesis of his whole idea. When we don't use the right mental tools, our ability to communicate just falls apart. And that breakdown, it's a slippery slope straight into misunderstanding, social tension, and yeah, even violence. It's a powerful and, frankly, a kind of terrifying idea. All right, so what's actually in this cognitive toolkit we're talking about? Farhaj's theory basically points to two mental superpowers that can help us build a much more accurate, more nuanced picture of the world. Let's break them down. Okay, so first up is this thing called the sheaf of lines. Just imagine you're a detective, right? And you've got all these different clues scattered all over the place. The sheaf of lines is that mental framework that helps you connect those dots, see the patterns, and actually solve the case. It's all about taking a chaotic mess of information and turning it into a clear, coherent picture. And next, we've got the day-by-day rhythm. Now, think of this one like a daily software update for your brain. It's the intentional habit of always looking for new information and using it to update your mental map of reality. It's about staying curious, staying flexible, and just being open to the idea that you might need to adjust your thinking. So you see how they work together? You've got the sheaf of lines to build the actual structure of your understanding, and then you have the day-by-day rhythm to constantly maintain and update it. The goal is to create this really powerful, flexible mental map that helps you navigate the world with a lot more clarity and a lot less conflict. Pretty cool, right? Okay, this all sounds great in theory, but I'm sure you're wondering, does it actually hold up in the real world? Well, the sources argue that Farhaj's work is actually backed by some seriously compelling evidence, starting with social science. Let's take a look. You can almost see it like a chain reaction, a domino effect. It starts with having poor cognitive tools. That leads directly to fragmented, broken communication. That, in turn, fuels social tension. And the final domino to fall? A much higher risk of violence. It's a really sobering thought how these tiny cognitive gaps can have such huge consequences. And here's the thing, the data seems to back this up completely. Study after study in social science has shown this really clear, undeniable link between communication breakdown and all sorts of negative social outcomes, including violence. So according to the sources, this isn't just a hunch, it's a statistical reality. And if you're still not convinced, just listen to this quote from the research. It's an absolute bombshell. It says that groups that lack these systematic ways to integrate information are overrepresented in risk profiles. In other words, the groups who can't connect the dots are far more likely to end up in conflict. It's a stark reminder of the real-world stakes here. But get this, the evidence for Farhaj's theory doesn't even stop with social science. It also finds support in a place you would probably never expect. The world of computer science and artificial intelligence, and this is where things get really fascinating. So it turns out that Farhaj's day-by-day rhythm, it's almost exactly how advanced AI learns. Seriously, think about how your streaming services recommendations get better and better over time. That's because the AI is constantly learning from what you watch and updating its model of what you like. It's the same fundamental principle. So you've got us humans on one side with our day-by-day rhythm for learning and adapting. And then you have AI on the other with its process of iterative learning. But at their core, they're the same basic idea, making constant, small improvements to get more accurate over time. It's like we're all running on a similar operating system, whether we're made of flesh and blood or silicon and code. So what's the big takeaway from this human-AI connection? It suggests that Farhaj's theory isn't just some random philosophical idea he came up with. It seems to be tapping into a truly fundamental pattern of how any intelligent system learns, adapts, and grows, whether it's inside our heads or humming away in a data center. Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here, right? From cognitive tools to social science statistics and even artificial intelligence. But let's bring it all home.
What does this actually mean for you and me? How can we use this to have better, more productive interactions in our own lives?
So, here's the playbook. First, we can use tools like the sheaf of lines to map things out, to see the whole picture before we jump to conclusions or react emotionally. Second, we can embrace that day-by-day rhythm. Just stay curious and keep updating our understanding. When you do those two things together, you build a foundation for resilient thinking and better communication, which, as we've seen, is the absolute key to lowering the risk of conflict.
It leaves you with a pretty big question, doesn't it? What if the key to a more peaceful world isn't really about convincing other people to change their minds, but about fundamentally changing the way we think? It's a huge idea, but definitely one worth thinking about. Thanks for tuning in.